Hi, my name is Daphne, and it is officially, what is the temperature outside now? 10 degrees outside. 10 degrees. Real feel is 0, and it's going to be lower than that if you can imagine for you guys in the warmer states whose states shut down for an inch of snow. We have a few feet. But it's going to be literally in the negatives. The temperature's just not going to be great this week. So, and in general, it's the winter and it's Ohio. I don't mind the snow. There isn't a lot going on outside. So, since we are in here, in the house, looking at all of the old gardening videos and going over all of my old gardening videos throughout the years, I thought it might be time to do a little bit of garden mapping. So for me, because I am a visual learner, a lot of my garden ideas actually occur on paper. So I drew a couple of years back and I made a video about it. I actually drew out a layout, a physical layout of my actual gardening space, although some things do need to be updated, so I might actually be redoing this at some point. But it's a complete layout of the gardening area, and kind of excited about it. Like I said, I do need to kind of redo the board because some of these spaces no longer exist, and there are some new spaces that have been created just to carve out a perennial garden bed. Here, for example, along this area, this is all of the perennial herbs with the exception of these two spaces, because these is where the opening is for the enclosed garden, and this is also where the trellis is. So this will always be, these will always be cherry tomatoes. So I'm going to have those here. I also have spread throughout, I just plant basil. This area here is actually shaded by the mulberry tree, and basil does not do well in that. So I have basil just maybe interplanted between the tomatoes here, and in this area here would just be basil. And then that's probably all of the basil I'll need. If I take good care of the basil, and I probably will have the cinnamon basil here. So I'll be probably going 3 different types of basil. I'll be doing the lettuce leaf basil, cinnamon basil, and then also Thai basil. And the Thai basil I actually do grow in a pot. It is very slow to germinate. It grows very, very slowly, and it needs a degree of consistent watering. So I do find that they grow better in a large pot, and I might actually have that growing within the perennial garden space. So Thai basil, lettuce leaf basil, and cinnamon basil, because cinnamon basil tea is just wonderful in the winter. And then I have tried to grow winter squash in the garden beds, but I've found that when it gets to a certain size, the vines want to like jump off the garden beds and they bend, and it's just not healthy for it. So if I am going to grow winter squash, I have to make room within the mulch space. And here would probably be a good place to grow a winter squash if that mullein that's planted here does not survive. It didn't look promising, but I do have a mullein on the side of the garage, which will be beautiful if it does survive this frost in its winter. But I do want to try to grow and protect the winter squash here, and then also maybe another winter squash here in this space, because if it does vine out and grow, that won't be a big deal within the walking space, since I don't really use the wheelbarrow in the spring and the summer. So I want to grow the winter squash in the ground and not necessarily in the raised beds. And then we have blueberries here. In the 2 pepper beds, I want to focus strictly on Thai peppers and cayenne peppers, because like I said, we eat quite a bit of those. And I'm also going to grow some on the porch as well. I probably won't be growing any jalapeno peppers. If I do, it's just because I like the look of the plant, but it'll probably be Thai peppers just to get those populations up. Primarily because I actually purchased some dried Thai peppers and cayenne peppers both within the grocery store, because I did not grow enough of these and I did not like the quality of the grocery store dry peppers. I would prefer to actually make, dehydrate, and store my own. So, I mean, it makes wonderful powders. You can just drop them in whole, dried and whole within your winter soups. It's just, and even with the fire tonic, you do need a hot pepper for that. And I only really do grow Thai peppers and cayenne peppers because I don't like the taste of the habanero peppers that I grew in the past. Incredibly hot. Hated the flavor. So I have the seeds, but I won't probably grow those again. And then for the okra, like I said, I do have to start the okra early. There was one year when I was still growing in the ground, which was amazing, by the way, because the ground is clay. So I had a bunch of soil mixed in and mulch, but it retained a lot of the moisture and all of the plants are very healthy, but it was a jungle. a complete jungle. But in any case, that year I actually did start the okra way early. I think I might have actually started it in the house and moved it out within a week. And it didn't die. Apparently okra can tolerate somewhat low temperatures, at least 30 degrees. They may stunt a little if you go beyond that, but I've read that they can actually tolerate lower temperatures. But they don't like they don't like their roots disturbed. So if you're going to germinate okra indoors, you would need to be able to move. You have to move them out and plant them before they get before it goes past a week, or you might actually stunt your plant. But this is always going to be an okra bed. I always try to grow them on the outskirts, at least 4 plants. Not really the biggest fan of okra, but I have a neighbor who really does eat okra, so they usually come around and pick some, and then I actually freeze it for soups, because you can kind of hide the texture in certain soups if you don't lose a lot of okra, and it's really, really good for gut health. So I always use this bed for okra. I have a little basil in here, which will bring in the pollinators to this bed specifically, and then I scatter some summer squash throughout. And I'll plant that later on, but I'll literally just plant them as a seed and then let them come up. Maybe. Because at that point, the pest pressures do come up. I just have to kind of be on it a little bit more. But there'll be summer squash in this bed, 1 cinnamon basil plant, and then there'll also be the okra, which will be planted out. Last but not least, we have the tomatoes. And like I said, I'm not the hugest fan of big tomatoes. I don't eat them fresh, but I like the look of them. And also, if you freeze them, they make wonderful tomato sauce if you are not lazy and can actually create it. And I say lazy because I have 4 bags of frozen tomatoes in the freezer that I have yet to touch, and it is January. So I need to I actually thought about maybe not buying tomato sauce, so that forces me to have to make it when I cook spaghetti. But it's better when you make it, and like practice makes better. So if I'll practice baking it, it'll just get better and better in theory. So I grow them just for that. But I'm more so interested in cherry tomatoes, and I have enough from those 2 trellis, from that 1 trellis that just provides all of like the dehydrated tomatoes I'll need and the fresh tomatoes. We literally only need a trellis of those. And in this garden bed, I only put 1 cherry tomato plant because 2, like, they overcrowd each other, they compete for resources, and it's just a mess. I mean, I'm just end up like shredding them throughout the season because it's just too many vines going everywhere. So now for the bigger tomatoes, I'm thinking this year some Abe Lincolns. I also know that a couple of the beefsteak tomatoes get huge. Cherokee purples get pretty big. And they typically grow very well in this garden bed, but I don't want to put tomatoes in this bed. It also has a trellis, so it feels like it's a waste of space, even though tomatoes, big and small, do need trellises. You need to have a way to support the weight when you're growing tomatoes, especially really big tomatoes. So I'm thinking about maybe putting the cherry tomatoes here, being mindful there's a mugwort here and oregano. And I actually want to keep those. They actually bring in some really beneficial pollinators. So I'll put some big tomatoes in this bed, and this will just be tomato row here. And then some tomatoes, like the smaller tomatoes, like San Marzanos and your Roma tomatoes, whatever type you're trying to grow, I'll have those grow here. And this year, I'm actually trying to get more in the habit of saving seeds. And if you're going to do that, especially in a smaller garden space, and mine would technically be a smaller garden space, you do need to limit the varieties you're growing. It would actually be better for me only to grow 1 type, and that way I know the seeds haven't cross-pollinated. But I like seeing more than 1 type. So there's an empty bed here, there's an empty bed here. There is a bed here that's not displaying itself here, which I have to kind of draw in. And then there's the bed here that has the golden rod, well, the golden seal. I'm always kind of surprised when that one does decide to come back, because we did have that drought and they do need water. It's a root. It died a slow, horrible death. So I don't know if it's going to grow back. If it will, that'll be great, because I really do want golden seal. And I know that it needs partial shade, which is why I put it under the mulberry tree. But I'm thinking about maybe potting it up, putting it in a pot, and maybe putting it somewhere else, because this space will be a really good space to grow something else in. There'll be flowers throughout here, just a way to bring in the pollinators. And then I was also thinking about just randomly, like, I know that the borage is all over the garden at this point. It grows like a weed. So there will be borage growing within these beds as well. And if I see it growing in the grass, I'll dig it up and I'll plop it in one of the garden beds. The one thing you do want to do is make sure you have flowers growing in your garden spaces, because that brings in your pollinators. And you want them because without them, you won't have your tomatoes and your okra and your squash. And you also won't have the bugs that will help you fight off the other bugs you don't want. So I always make sure I have flowers growing within my garden space, and I did not used to do that. I just started bringing it in when I started to recognize the importance of that. So this year is focusing mostly on re-strengthening a lot of the garden beds that need to be re-strengthened. I actually created a little area over here that mulched to keep down the weed pressure. And we're also going to get our systems up and running for watering this, so that I don't necessarily have to come out with the watering hose every morning in the summer. Even if it's early mornings, it's tedious. So we can cut down on a lot of the garden labor and just more so focus on the pest pressures and the voles. That'll be amazing. So that's the focus this year. I'm not growing a lot of new stuff, even though I'm so tempted to buy more seeds. But as I mentioned, I'm going into year 6 gardening, and I more so want to focus on the foods we actually eat, which helps to reduce the grocery bills. But it also helps me to feel accomplished in some way, that I have food in the refrigerator that we actually love eating, like the pole beans and the okra. And we can dry all of the herbs and the peppers, and there's a benefit to that. You know, we have fresh eating in the strawberries and the blackberries and the raspberries, and hopefully the blueberries when they come back. We had at least 4 persimmon that we got this year from the persimmon plant. And hopefully with more water, we'll actually have an abundance of figs as well, because it got transplanted to a larger container. But there's a benefit to, having a garden that has food that you actually eat. And leave a comment below and let me know how you're organizing your garden space. Do you use more computer-generated programs for yours? Do you use lists and charts? I've seen people do an Excel spreadsheet about when they plant things out and, when things germinated. Some people keep notebooks. I used to keep a notebook. Some people are more visual like I am, but they have a computer-generated program for that. How do you organize your garden space? Do you organize, or do you just kind of free flow wherever can fit a plant in, can fit a plant? I used to do that with my second year. Wherever I can plop a plant, I kind of did that. And I had hundreds of plants. Now I'm a little more strategic because I can't give away tomato plants to every neighbor. They don't take them anymore. So some of them will, but most of them just kind of like, they see me coming. So I'm learning to conserve a little bit more of my resources. So how do you organize your garden space? How do you figure out what it is you want to grow? How do you figure out the tasks you want to do this year? Like, do you have any gardening goals? Any goals for your growing space? Do you have any goals for like what you want to like harvest or what you want to preserve? Drop a comment in the description. Drop a comment below and just let me know what you guys are doing for your garden space for 2025 growing season. In any case, thank you so much for watching, and you guys have a great day. Peace.